Hi there, I hope you're having a fantastic day. I'm Drew Badger, and in this video we're going to cover 7 word pairs that are confusing both for native speakers and English learners. The first one is could have, should have, and would have. Now we contrast this with could of, should of, and would of. When we're speaking, obviously these don't really make much difference, and typically the sound of it sounds like I should have done something. I should have done something, like I should have done something, or I could have done something, or I would have done something. But grammatically correct speech, we need have there. So I would have done something, or I should have done something, or I could have done something. But when we form contractions of these, it becomes would have, could have, and should have. So again, when you're speaking, these don't really make much of a difference because it really, obviously, you're not spelling anything. But when you're writing something down, this becomes incredibly important. You should not be using should of, could of, and would of. You're talking about, oh, I wish something. Maybe I'm regretting something about the past, like I should have, and again, this is should have, like I should have locked my door before I left my house. I should have locked my door before I left my house. So the blending of it, the pronunciation is actually really great if you want to think about it as should of, but when you write it, it's either should with the apostrophe and VE, you're making a contraction, or you have should have. If you're nervous about this, you don't remember which it is, don't make the contraction, just make the actual full 2 words. Should have, would have, and could have. Next, this is one of the most commonly confused things, and this is for both native English speakers and non-natives, and this is accept versus accept. Accept and accept. It's basically the same pronunciation, so it's an understandable thing that people would have trouble using these in their writing. But when you talk about accepting something, just think of accept as a verb. You accept something, like you're receiving something. But accept with an E, you're talking about like a result, and this is typically a noun. So you're saying, oh, like the exception to the rule or something. Again, we're using it this way where we're talking about a noun as opposed to whether we should be using like a verb, like I accept the consequences of my actions. So I'm receiving something, and that's the actual verb versus the noun form. So think about whether you're talking about a noun or a verb. Are you talking about an action or a result? If you're talking about an action, think about a with action. So you've got accept. And if you're talking about the opposite, then you wouldn't use a, you would have e for that. So that's the exception to the rule. Accept. Next, we've got lose and loose. Lose and loose. Lose just means the opposite of win. And if you think about, oh, I lost the game, I'm losing something right now, L-O-S-E, to lose something. But loose, and listen carefully to the difference in these pronunciations. Lose, it's like L-O-Z or L-U-Z or something. Lose versus loose. Now, to have something that's loose means like if I look at the neck of my shirt, like here, the collar here, my collar is quite loose. Like the collar is quite loose. It's not tight. Like it's choking me right now. So if it is tight or the opposite of loose, I'm talking about something that's like flowing freely, or maybe you've got pants that keep falling down because they're just not very tight around you. So those pants are loose. But listen carefully to how these blend and try using them in your conversations, as well as putting these in the comments below. The more you practice using these, the more you will get used to using them automatically and correctly in your conversations. So my pants are very loose, but I will lose the game, or we are losing the basketball game right now. Next, complement versus complement. This is another homonym, and homonym just means like the same sound. So homo, same, homo, same. So we've got the same sound for 2 different words, complement and complement. And again, this is one of those things where in a conversation, when you're speaking, it doesn't matter because you don't know what the spelling is. But it is really important for your writing, because if you make these mistakes, you really look, well, kind of dumb, I suppose. So people are maybe looking even at like a resume or a teacher grading your writing. They're going to think, why does this person not know the difference between these 2 words? It should be quite obvious. Anyway, a compliment, when you're talking about receiving a kind word from somebody else, that is a compliment with an I, and a compliment where you're talking about 2 things going well together, that's compliment with an E. So compliment, if you think about just a good way to remember this, you're complimenting, or someone is complimenting you, like I am receiving a compliment. So we've got the compliment in I. The I letter is in that, so it's a compliment for I, or a compliment for me. So this is a great way to remember that. So when you're writing this, think about it. Is someone saying something nice about about myself? And this is a compliment, where if you're talking about two things going well, these two dishes for our meal complement each other. So this is where you would use the E. Compliment. Compliment. Next is another pair of words that's really confusing. Both of these words are correct, but they're often just misused in conversations. And these are less and fewer. Less and fewer. Now, people will often talk about less and fewer when they're talking about maybe the amount of something, but one is used for the amount of something where you can't count it, and the other is used for counting the amount of something where you actually have an individual thing or individual things you can count. Now we're talking about, let's say if you're at the grocery store and you see the sign that says 10 items or less. The sign actually should say 10 items or fewer. Now, typically the reason people don't use this in conversations is because people just want to express themselves more quickly, and it's easier to say 10 items or less, 10 items or less, than it is to say 10 items or fewer. It just has kind of maybe a more awkward way of pronouncing it, and people actually get the sense for less being correct in that way. But when you're talking about less, like less information, this is something that you can't count. So I have less money than I had yesterday, but I have fewer dollars in my pocket. So if you're talking about the amount of something, like you can lower your hand like this, but you can't count it exactly, you got less and less space in your hands. But if this way you're talking about the amount of something, you've got fewer and fewer and fewer, you're talking about the actual number of something like that. So to remember it nice and easily, if you think about fewer, you've got the ER at the end of that for number. So fewer, you got numbers for that, so you can actually remember it more easily that way. And again, this is really important for writing, but in your conversations as well. If you can use it correctly, it'll certainly help you and make you look more intelligent, or at least maybe not look dumb like we sometimes do when we express things in an incorrect way. Anyway, so if you're talking about less than something, we're talking about the amount of something, but fewer than something, we've got that ER for number, we can count that thing. So you should have fewer items in your shopping cart instead of less items. Next, we've got amused and bemused. Amused and bemused. Both of these are a little bit more advanced, and you might not hear them as often in conversations or see them as often in writing, but they will appear. When you are amused by something, it's funny to you. It's interesting. I'm like amused by that clown that's dancing and doing something. Maybe I've got like something stuck on my face right now, and that's amusing to you. But when you are bemused by something, this means maybe you're confused by something. So you're actually like, I don't really know what to do. I'm dealing with a problem over here that's bemusing. It's troubling for me or confusing for me in some way. So when you think about be something, like be, like become or bemused, you're talking about like being in a position of something. So you're bemused, you're in a position of like amusement or like kind of confusion in some way. But amused, you're just talking about having something that's funny or interesting for you. And the final tricky pair that we'll talk about is disinterested versus uninterested. Disinterested versus uninterested. Now, the key to understanding these really is in the prefix, and this is the little bit of the word at the beginning. We've got dis and un. So disinterested and uninterested. They sound like basically they're the same word, but the meanings are actually quite different. If you think about just being interested in something, like, wow, I'm like focused on something. Hopefully you're interested in this lesson. If you are not, then I guess I'm doing a bad job. But if you are interested in the lesson, it means you're focusing and you're giving me your attention. But if you're uninterested, that would be the opposite. So maybe you're just like, oh, look, there goes a bird, and I'm watching something, like you're not paying any attention to this lesson at all. So it is not interesting you. It is uninteresting. So this is when you're talking about using the un, this is typically when we would talk about the opposite of something. Interested, uninterested. But disinterested means you're just kind of impartial, and you want maybe a disinterested judge in a court case where you've got two different people. They're both arguing If you have a person that maybe cares more about one side or one group of people than the other, then you have an interested party, somebody that's actually caring about one person or group more than the other one, and that's going to make for a very bad judge in that case. So you want a disinterested person, and a disinterested person is not interested one way or the other. It doesn't really matter. So when you're thinking about like I was talking to my brother and he seemed uninterested in what I was saying, I'm saying that he's not interested or he doesn't care. But if I'm talking about maybe I need some like advice from someone, I need some advice from a disinterested person. So it doesn't matter, like they're not trying to sell me something or get me to do something. It doesn't matter to them. So they are disinterested. Disinterested. Well, I hope these have been interesting for you. Hope you have been interested and not either disinterested or uninterested, but hopefully it's been an interesting lesson. If it has, do click that like button and become a subscriber to the YouTube channel. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about how to become a confident, fluent English speaker quickly, click on the link in this video to take our free English fluency quiz. It will let you tell us what your biggest fluency frustration is, so we can tell you exactly what you need to do about that to start speaking more confidently. Click on the link in this video to do that, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.